This is FIDE Master Viktor Neostroyev. Today we have a webinar which is devoted to uh, st advantage stability. I'm going to explain what it is. I'm going to talk about stable and unstable advantages. Thank you for coming. So this webinar is recorded and also is streaming on YouTube. Sorry, I have some problems with my voice today. Well, let me know if the rest, I mean the video and well, the sound is somewhat okay. Okay, Shahrat, I saw you send a few games to me, but I didn't have time to check because I was preparing for the webinar. And before we start with our main topic today, let's talk about this position that we discussed. So there was a homework for you. There were two positions. In this first one, rook e2, and I was asking you what happens in case of that, because they are attacking the bishop as well as the b7 pawn. So here we should continue with bishop b6. John sent a correct answer here. So after rook b7, it's rook takes f2. And after the king goes there, we can capture this and use this as a passed pawn, as well as we can add pressure on c3 and capture the c3 pawn too. The second question was regarding a different position. So let me show how the game continued then. Bishop b6, attacking there. It ties the enemy rook down to the f2 pawn. Rook c2, attacking these two, but b7 is lost anyway. So, for example, bringing the rook back to e7 would save this pawn, but how black progresses with their attack? Rook c2, bishop b7, rook takes c3. This is protected now. King g3 was played, and rook c2. So still keeping attacking these two, which means that the rook is always tied down to the f2 pawn. White continued with a4, king e7, h4, undermining. Well, you cannot take, but black decided to take. King takes, king goes to d6 to protect there, and only after that it's possible to capture on f2. Well, if you want, of course, you can capture on f2 with a check and then just retreat. It actually works too, but if you deliver a check, it makes the enemy king closer to your pawn. So king d6, king h5, and in this position, bishop f2. Now the king captures, but bishop e3 is played, and they continue with king g7, king e7 back. And my question here was, what about this pin? Why didn't play it in the game? Because it is a mistake, but how to prove that this move is a mistake? So what are your suggestions? What black should play? Okay, maybe rook g2. Let's say the king moves to h7 or h8. Let's say h7. Then we go f5. What's the purpose of f5? I'm sure there is a better way to play. So, okay, let's say rook g2, king h7. How to play then? Yes, thanks, guys. So thanks for Arush and Square Chess Academy. Yeah, that's right. So King f8. With this move, we create a mating threat. How our opponent can defend against this mating threat? He has to play Rook h1, right? But even this doesn't work. We continue with Rook g7, King goes to h8, and Bishop d4, threatening with a discovered attack. Moreover, this discovered attack actually is Rook g8, King moves, and Rook h8, checkmate, because we have the pawn, which stops the king from escaping to g6. So there is not much he can do. Even if he tries to play something like that, which makes sense actually, because once the rook moves, they take there, it still fails because Rook g8 is a double check. It forces the king to move, and Rook h8 is just a checkmate. So Rook e1 would be a terrible mistake. Instead, the game continues with f4. Rook h2 anyway. Now Rook e1, well, and the king goes to h6. That's the difference. So he doesn't want to go to h7. King f6. King h7. Then bishop d2 to chase the rook away. Rook g7. It forces the king to move to h8, because if the king goes somewhere else to h6, which means we can capture on f4, and then he loses a rook. So king goes to h8, after which the game continued with this move. Well, it was possible to play bishop f4, but we shouldn't lose the pawn on c4. c5. Rook h5 attacking it, but bishop f3. Bishop d4, Rook d5, and after Rook g4, he just resigned because there is no way he can save this pawn. So Rook f5, yeah, but yeah, Rook f5, well, Rook f5 cannot stop checkmate. Well, it's not a checkmate. Okay, so if Rook f5, it is a checkmate. Well, let's say king moves. Let's decide where. Let's say e7. And then this is a checkmate. Well, rook sacrificed and bishop blocks and so on. So, okay. What if they play rook h5 to defend? Then we just win the pawn. And with two pawns, it's definitely winning with no chances. Okay, that was the homework from our previous webinar. Now let's focus on our topic today. So today we are talking about advantage stability. In chess, there are a lot of kinds of advantages. It can be material advantage, it can be far advanced pawns, the open enemy king, or something else. And we can divide all types of advantage to stable and unstable categories. We can call stable ones the ones which our opponent cannot get rid of without mistakes from our end. So once again, so stable advantage is such a kind of advantage that we cannot lose only in case if we make a mistake. So for example, it's a material advantage. If we have material, well, our opponent can win it back and equalize the position once we make a certain mistake, right? Unstable advantages are such advantages like initiative, better development, and they may disappear if we don't take certain actions. So if, for example, we have material advantage, our task is to just make normal moves, just avoid mistakes and make normal moves. But if we have unstable advantage, such as better development, we have to take advantage of a better development right away. We typically open the positions to to get our pieces better coordinated and punish our opponent for not being developed. Okay, I'm sure you understand the concept. I don't think g takes f6 makes sense. So white has stable advantage in this position. What their advantage is? Well, the d6 as a backward pawn and is unlikely to go there. There is a similar situation with the h7 pawn. There is an open file, so h7 and d6 are weaknesses. And once we move our pieces away, we may allow our opponent to get rid of these weaknesses by pushing them. But if we keep the position as it is, then these weaknesses will appear almost for the entire game. So what would you suggest for white to continue here to fix this stable advantage? It's not huge, but stable. Okay, so rook d5. Well, rook d5 does make sense. This move wasn't played in the game, but let's say they do rook d8. It's definitely about the blockade on the d file. But in order to make okay, rook h3 suggested by Brian. Interesting. Yeah, rook h3 makes sense too, maybe to bring the rook there and attack d6 one more time. Well, what white did, I think, is better. White exchanged the queens to avoid any problem. So taking on g4 means we can capture on b7. So it doesn't favor black at all. So for example, queen g4, queen takes b7, how to play? They can castle. They can still have this right to castle, but after g takes f6, how to play? If rook captures, there is the other rook hanging. If bishop captures, it's queen h7 checkmate. And at the same time, the white king, which is actually look exposed, is relatively safe. So they have to exchange. The control over the d5 square, pressure over these two pawns, better bishop comparing to this one, more space, tells us that this position is more favorable for white. Strategically, it's actually almost winning. But they play king d7. Now we do take and play g5 once again, still to be able to fix the pawns. This is how we expand space and keep the h7 pawn immobilized. Bishop e7. Let's decide which plan white should initiate here. So I'm waiting for your suggestions, guys. Okay. So bishop e3, definitely yes. c4, well, definitely as a part of the plan, but not immediately, because first you need to consolidate your pieces. So they play king e2 to connect the rooks, to bring the king closer to the place of action. Rook a f8, bishop e3. What does this bishop do? So the bishop protects here and stops h6 or h5. It can also go that side, that way, to add pressure here. While this bishop is forced to defend d6. Also, the f4 square is protected by our bishop, which means that they have no chances to get any activity here. So rook c8 was played. Now, I'm sure many of you would consider playing this, right? But let's say king e6. What then? I don't see the point of playing f4. They just take on f4. Or even not take, but ignore. Because if you take, then d takes and they're fine. Rook hd1. Well, okay, rook hd1. Well, they just ignore which move to play. Maybe rook c6. What then? I don't fully understand, Shahrad, which bishop you want to take. So rook d1 is a more logical move. Okay. So, for example, Brian here messaged on the YouTube that he wants to play b4. This is actually the move that was played in the game. But how? What's the purpose of this move? You can play c4, c5 strategy later, but b4 is a very crucial move. Why it is important? Yeah, guys, you can actually, if you want to say something, you can unmute yourself. So everyone is muted by default, but if you want to say something, you can unmute and suggest. Okay, so Peter wants to open the position with f4. Peter, what about f4 just king e6? So they won't take. If you want to take, they take with the pawn. And it seems that black is fine with it. Maybe you can play f4, but I don't see the point of doing it right away. Okay, in this position. So f4, let's say I play this move. You can try f5. For example, take, then rook h6. Oh, actually, this is a nice idea. It works. So you take on f5 and you get some strong pawns there. So you're about to play this. And after the bishop goes somewhere here, even g6. Of course, don't blunder the rook, move it, and then you threaten with g6. Yeah, logical. Okay, so let me take, and then king e6. So you can double, right? But rook c6. And I still have enough defenders. And now even there is no plan of doing this because I take. So f4 opening the position does make sense only in case if you are sure that you get real benefits. For example, you win a pawn. If not, instead, this is not a logical plan because you are likely to get rid of one of your benefits and lose your stable advantage. So what can we take in this position? Now, you mean not in this. In this position, can you take on d6? No. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So 3 versus 3, the defender wins. Yeah, well, if you push the pawn, I can take. So take king f7. Rook d7. Okay, fine. Then I have what is better, rook e6 or rook e8? Okay. Let me make a few moves back. Yeah, e5 looks good, so let me play this move. And you cannot take because I take there. Yeah, actually, rook c5 saves the game. Rook c5 saves the game because if e takes d6, I take there. And it should be fine. Black is winning. And if you take there, you sacrifice exchange, and no, black is still better. So that's why b4. Well, but you didn't answer what does this move do? This move uh, makes a6 a weakness. Sounds weird, right? But this move provokes b5. Why does this move provokes b5? If not, then you play b5 yourself, and after take, you attack b7. So you get another object of the attack, the b7 pawn. If, let's say, they don't, but play a5, well, a5 is a weakness. It's not possible to defend it with b6. So, of course, they lose it. That's why b5 was played. So if not, then again, it's b5 and take, and a6 is still a weakness. Rook d1 to remaneuver the rook to a1. Rook c6 defending, and rook h3. What rook h3 is doing? For example, if your opponent decides to get rid of the backward pawn on d5, you can take, the king takes, and then you win the pawn on h7. Because there is no defense. That's why instead of doing any actions like that, they should play rook c7 and bishop f8. But rook c7 right away, rook c7 right away doesn't work. a6 is hanging, so bishop f8 first. Well, I don't want to check c4. I already talked about this. So bishop f8, rook h1, rook c7, rook h4. What this move is played for? This move prepares for d5 to protect the e4. Yeah, so it prepares d5. d5 was played. Well, they could play better. They could try to play something like rook c4. f3. Well, rook goes back. Rook a1, rook c6. And, well, it's not obvious how to defeat the black pieces right away. But d5, which actually is typically positive because they are trying to get rid of their weakness, the d6, and activate this bishop. This time is a mistake. How? How this is a mistake? Well, rook a1 first, attacking this, rook c6, and e takes d5. King takes, however, rook d1. And what's the purpose of this attack? With this attack, we are able to invade the enemy camp. So our rook doesn't allow the enemy king to invade and attack our pawns, for example. So he has to go back. So that's why rook h4 was a preparation for, well, rook h4 was a preparation for d5, because the king c4 or king e4 is no longer possible. King e6, rook d8. Now, how do they unpin? Every time they move the bishop like that, we can exchange and win the pawn on h7, after which g6 can be lost, or even the bishop can get trapped. Let me show you. Take rook h7, so rook goes there, something like that. Rook c6 again. Yeah, rook c6 again works. Okay, maybe there is something else. Okay, I don't know. Let's just activate the king. King f3, bishop c5, king f4, like that. What else can we do? Doing this move means king f7. Okay, so this f3. It prevents e4, and after king f5, we can deliver a check. And king goes back, then again a tempo move, and then finally we go to the center. King d3. Bishop c5 to stop rook c4, and king goes there. This bishop is terrible, it's trapped. Okay, fine. So bishop g7, of course, shouldn't be played. Rook d6 was played. Check, king goes there, and rook e5. This is how the game ended. White got an extra pawn and a completely winning position because of active pieces, and black resigned. Why not king d5, for example? Who can tell me?
I think it's because
Oh, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself and repeat again?
the rook is going to capture the e5 pawn, and when the king captures, the bishop is going to go to f4.
You mean this line? Or maybe this line? d4 is better. No, it's not. No, it's just a simple move bishop c5. And then once the rook moves, we take there. So that's why here, at the very least, they lose a pawn on e5 and then the game. So let's do a quick summary. Well, in this original position that we started analyzing, White had two main advantages. The two main types of advantage. No, not types. Okay, Black position contained weaknesses, d6 and h7. And that provided White with advantage in this position. They exchanged the queens and created the third weakness, the a6 pawn, by doing b4 move and provoking b5. This is how it worked. Okay, fine. Let's continue. Our next game is the game between Jezerol Capablanca and Karel Treibel, which is very complicated game. So what do you think? Well, White is obviously better. White has more space, better bishop. The ability to attack on both sides of the board. The center is stable. There is no way to break through in the center. And Black has no counterplay, which is a key. All they have is to stay and wait, and once White creates a threat, they have to defend their position. So what do you think? What White should do? So get the knight to a6. Brian, what do you mean? Can you please explain it? Okay, so b5 or a5. Interesting. Well, a5 closes the position because then b5 means a sacrifice. So you'd better keep the opportunity of playing b5 for future. Well, if, for example, the position on the king side is totally closed, then at least you have queen side to attack. So queen d1, but queen d1, which plan does queen d1 allow you to do? And queen d1 is just a move, not a plan. Okay, so here white plays g5. What's the purpose of this move?
To
Purpose
lock
of
the
the... Can you repeat again, please?
The purpose of g5 is to lock the position.
Mhm. No, not the position, but to lock the G file in order to open the H file. Okay, so can we go through the Brian's suggestion? If we do knight D2, knight B3, knight A5, attacking B7, well, it does make sense, but they can just defend it with bishop C8. The rook moves somewhere, and bishop C8 is enough to stop your knight activity. Then you would have to play B5 and play on that side of the board. This is what white has in mind too. But right now he plays g5 because this king is in more danger. That's why it makes sense to attack it. Because if you imagine h5, rook h2, h takes g6, it's just a disaster. The king and the h7 pawn will be in attack. So queen d8, h4. And they decide to evacuate the king with king g7. However, let's say they just stay and wait. Queen e7 back, king f2. Again, they play this. Then you can play h5 already yourself. And you threaten to take, and you threaten to open the file and checkmate the king. If they take, it's just queen h1, which then allows you to take on h5. And get your other rook to the game, and it's will be game over. So let's go back. Well, very often in such positions, it does make sense to play h5 and close the position themselves. But, en passant, of course. So knight takes h6, queen h1, knight g4. And how would you play in this position after knight g4? King e2. Yeah, king e2 makes sense. Um, and I think your position is better after that. Yes, but okay. So, but taking on g4 is better. Taking on g4 and then doing 95, and you definitely have the full compensation. Well, e2 is a better square rather than g1, but for the king, I mean. But sacrificing the exchange and playing 95 is much better. How do they survive? Bishop here. Okay, fine. Rook g1. We take, bring, and then play h5. There should be a checkmate soon. So that's why they cannot stay and wait. Doing king g7 was actually a right strategy. h5, well, taking again means queen h4, queen h5. Rook h8. Now black prepares himself for opening the h file. Rook h2. Queen c7, queen c3 in order to bring the rook behind the other rook. So queen d8, king f2, queen c7 back. It's hard to suggest anything else for black. They are only playing for a draw, hoping that the white's resources are not enough to succeed. Rook goes there. Now this rook goes to g8. Queen e1. Rook b8, queen e3. Well, there is no point of playing these moves actually, but queen e3 seemed for white like a better position. Rook goes back. Now let's decide. If we open the position on the king side, how does it help? So let's say h takes, and we can swap the rooks, but how do we take advantage of it? What would you suggest instead for white? I like the rook sacrifice. Shahrat, which rook sacrifice? Or do you mean rook g4? A rook for a knight sacrifice in one of the previous lines? Okay, this is where we switch to the other side of the board. And now we can succeed. Not now, but we first open the position on the queen side, and now we can move there. So this move attacks the pawn. If they play e5, this is a weakness. So for example, let's say, oh, okay, first of all, they took. Now, should we take back? Or what would you suggest first? Okay, take. Or not to take. To take or not to take? Well, rook a8 is going to happen, so that's why we shouldn't delay this move. But instead of doing it right away, we can do this, which forces the king to go to f8, and two rooks are stuck on the queen side now. So 8 takes b5. Of course, the king moves, but now we can already play b6 and dominate through the a file, because the queen goes to the back rank. We just double the rooks and it's fine. So the idea of b5, which was originally suggested here, we combined with the king side play. Let's go back. For example, let's say they play a5, which is the other option. Then h6, king moves, b6, queen moves here, queen e8, and we win this pawn. How? Knight d2 and knight b3. We win this pawn, bring our rooks, and then advance it further to open the position there and take advantage of the passed pawn on b6. So that's why taking on b5 was the only option. But enemy pieces are stuck, and we already capture it on b5. Now b6, queen b8, rook a1. So doing something like that in order to exchange means that we won't exchange. We will play queen b2, forcing the queen to go away. Not queen b2, queen c3. I want to use the second rank to transfer my other rook from the other side. So rook a1, rook c8. Now b7 is our target. And this time, first we let our rook to a7. Then the other rook goes there. And we need to attack it with something else. Which something else? The knight. The knight goes to a5. So queen e3, king g8, and now white started making the moves with the king. Don't pay much attention. These moves make no sense at all, and typically are played to make your opponent more nervous about what's going on, showing that I can do what I want and you just have to stay and wait. You don't have any counterplay. So this king's move and queen move for white doesn't make any sense. And finally, the king ends on g2, and knight d2, knight a5 plan was realized. In order to defend this, they go to d8. What would you continue? So can we bring the knight to e5? Yes, we can. But what the knight is doing there? The knight on e5 is more useful. Now the last move is bishop a6, and that's it. They cannot save the pawn on b7, and once the pawn dies, it's absolutely winning. So this, a6 is dead, because just moving the knight and capturing it is fine. The h7 is hanging, so in order to save it, they have to play something like that, which is already a blunder. Well, they could try this, but this doesn't look like a good move at all. How would we continue? Just moving the knight away and taking on a6 is completely fine. But they played rook a7, so no, b7, no. b7, rook c7. Oh, well, here, so king g8, b7 doesn't work. They just play rook c7. Well, you can still benefit by doing this. Oh, no, it's a blunder. Sorry. So that's why it's it's better just to move the knight and capture on e6. This is what happened in the game. Rook e7 was played, and after that, the rook is distracted, knight e6 is a fork, and we are 2 pawns up after we capture on e6. So this, and this. There is nothing more to discuss. So in that position, originally, white had advantage, and their main advantage was extra space and the ability to attack on both sides of the board. And in order to exploit this advantage, they first advanced their h pawn, keeping the g file closed, threatening to open the position. So black prepared for this by bringing his pieces to the king side, both rooks, one rook on h8, the other on g8. And after that, white opened the position on the queen side and attacked the main weakness, the b7 pawn. Fine, let's continue. This is the game. Quite an interesting one. It was King's Indian. So the game between Lubomir Kavalek and Eugenio Torre. C4, G6, D4. So one of the common lines, knight f3 castle. So typically bishop e2 is the main move. However, h3 is playable too. E5. Well, you of course know that this pawn is not hanging. There is knight e4 and the discovered attack. And if you decide to sacrifice the knight for something to take the enemy knight for free, they have this check. And then you even lose a piece. So of course the pawn is not hanging and you have to react, like you can keep the position. You can keep the position, you can keep tension in the position by doing bishop e3, or you can push d5. d5 is more common. a5, bishop e3, knight goes to a6, knight d2. Well, in this position, black decided to play a very natural but provoking move. They took on e4. Who can tell me what's the purpose of this move? Okay, there is a question from Shahred regarding my Catalan courses. Yes, I do have some Catalan courses I can share with you. Just give me a sec. I'll find it first. Okay, fine. I will show you a little later after we finish the analysis of this game. Okay, so 94, the idea is to play a5, f4, trapping the bishop. Well, it traps the bishop only if this knight takes. f4, knight goes back, and then f4 traps the bishop. But of course, we take with the d knight, and after f5, this bishop has flexibility. So if knight g3, it's f4. But in this position, we can play bishop g5. Queen goes to e8, knight g3. And then, for example, they play e4. So why did black sacrifice a piece? There was the idea he wanted to either win a piece back or he wanted to force white to play the only moves. For example, here, if you just develop your pieces like bishop e2, you can get into trouble. Which trouble I'm talking about? Well, bishop e2 is very natural, right? You're gonna castle soon. But what's the trouble? f4, e3, you think? f4, then knight takes there. Oops. f4, knight takes on e4. Okay, yes, Brian, it's bishop c3 first, and then f4. Yes, and if the knight moves, it's even f3, taking advantage of a pin. The bishop is trapped, but even if not, f takes g2 is also dangerous. So take, take. This is lost, and black pieces are more active. So white either agrees that he has a piece but then has to play accurately, or white has to take some immediate actions. Well, if white is not prepared, then it does make sense to play something else. Well, otherwise, bishop f4 would save the white's position, and they are definitely much better with good chances to play for a win once they finish their development. For example, this is where I can say that black has kind of unstable advantage. They have better development. Um, but once white does these two moves, white will be completely winning because the white has material advantage, which is a stable advantage. Okay, fine. Let's continue. Range defense course. No, I don't. Sorry. I have a Khan Sicilian course and also Paulson Taimanov Sicilian course. So after f5, white played a completely different move, which can't be understood by the first glance, but actually has a very strong sense if you look at the position in depth. So what would you suggest? Well, if you don't see anything, just try to guess how white played. I'm not saying it's the best move, but this is the move which allows white to fix small but stable advantage. So knight g5 looks obvious. No, Brian, knight g5 doesn't work. You break the connection with f4 between these two pieces, and now it's hanging. Yeah. Any other guesses? Well, bishop g5 is the best move. We already discussed it, yes. But here white decided to avoid this main line. Probably he wasn't prepared, but instead he wanted to fix a small but stable advantage. Okay, he played g4, sacrificing the knight back. And they have no other choice but to take. Because f4 doesn't make sense. Bishop d2, and what did black achieve? They are still a piece down, with no attack to compensate their material losses. F takes e4, well, yes, what else? F takes e4, knight takes e4. So can you share what exactly white advantage is here? Well, space, yes, but this is not the key. Why g4 was played? So it's the knight in the center. This knight works like a blockade, which means that neither bishop f5 nor something else can be played. So knight c5, for example, bishop c5 will be played. And this knight makes both bishops bad. If there is no e4, the bishop on g7 has no work. If, well, and this bishop also, it doesn't look good. Well, it can go to d7, but what is he doing there? So having this knight on e4 and the restricting enemy activity, well, is the main advantage of white in this position. So b6. b6 to reinforce the position of the knight on c5, of course. Bishop d3, knight c5. Well, taking with the bishop makes a lot of sense, but instead it was b3. b3 is also important move. For example, if you play queen d2, then they can play a4, and now you cannot chase this knight away. But with b3, you can. a4, b4, for example. What happens if they take on e4? Well, then you do the same task with the bishop. It makes this bishop bad, and definitely white has advantage. They can continue with h4, h5, and try to open the position on the king side and checkmate the king. There is no even need to castle here. In the game, it was 93. I think this is a strategic mistake, actually, because this bishop wasn't good. Look, there is a pawn chain, on one side, and on the other side it can become better, but it can become better only once the pawn goes to h5. So at the very least you can do knight takes d3 later once you believe that the bishop becomes stronger than your knight on c5. But black decided to play it in right away. Queen d3, bishop d7, king a2, connecting the rooks. b5, trying to open the position. f3, so securing the knight. Take, take. So completely useless bishop. The white is going to attack on the king side too, but as well as he's going to play on the queen side. Why not to castle queen side? Because the b file is open or was about to get open. So if you castle here and they play b5, what do you do? So if you do this, they play a4. This pawn is lost. So bishop d7, king b2, b5, f3, take, take, rook b8. Now rook a b1 is forced. Take, take, queen e8. They play such a move because they would love to fight for the b file. How would you continue in this position? Okay, there are several suggestions. Bishop d2 or g5. Okay, great. h4. Bishop g5. What's the purpose of bishop g5? There is also queen b3 move. Interesting. Bishop g5 preparing a knight for on f6. Well, they will exchange their bishop for the knight, even if the rook moves. So let's say you do this, they play that. Then what? This doesn't make sense. So what did you get? The bishop on f6, but I don't think you can play these moves. But even if you can, well, there will be queen f8. So queen b3, queen b3 stops this, which is good. And then, yes, you can play queen b7 and try to attack enemy weaknesses. It does make sense, I agree. What else? Bishop d2, what's the point? Well, it's, you mean, but they can push it further. Queen d2. Not clear for me. What for? Let's say queen a6, attacking there, or even rook. No, rook b8 doesn't work. So h4 was played. Why? To play h5, and then to play knight g5. For example, rook b8, h5, rook b1, queen a6. If, for example, they played g takes, it was knight g5. Now, well, h6, let's say. Queen goes there, king f8. And how would you continue in this position? So I'm waiting for your suggestions. Okay. Yes, thanks, Brian. It's correct. Well, the first move is correct for all. Shahrat, knight e6, and then you do what? Then we take the h pawn with our bishop. Yeah, that's right. So knight e6, they have to take, otherwise they lose there. And then bishop h6, because we're threatening to take this, as well as we're threatening to do this. Bishop blocks, do not lose the queen. Bishop blocks, queen g7, and then they still lose the bishop and the queen too. So bishop h6 is a deadly threat. They have to take, we take, and once the king moves, we take on e6 with a check. Well, if they play something like that, we can even win the queen right away. If king e7, then take king f8. Well, and just g takes h6 with the idea of promotion works well. Why not? Okay, so it's completely winning. That's why h5 is a problem, because knight g5 is coming and this becomes a weakness. If bishop e8, knight invades the enemy camp with knight e6. That's why they're trying to do some counterplay. But queen b8, and now they have to retreat. Why? Because well, if they do this, they blunder. If they move the king, then queen c7 and the pawn is protected. That's why after queen b8, they have to go back. Take. And now the main advantage of white is space. They are able to invade the enemy camp with their pieces left on the board. What would you suggest? Okay, h6 definitely yes, fixing this weakness. Then the bishop moves. How would you continue? And then we can continue with knight f6. So now if the king goes there, we play knight e8 and win this pawn. If king goes there, then we play knight h7 and win the h pawn. Okay, so let me answer your Peter. I can answer your question a little later. Okay. So yeah, definitely knight f6 invasion. Well, maybe the bishop can go that way, but then this is a bad bishop. If so, you can invade the enemy camp like that and then capture all these. So that's the reason why bishop f8 is better. Knight f6, this, king d3. They are trying to do some counterplay with d5. Oh, well, first knight g5, h7, and well, yeah, bishop g7, of course, but knight e6. Bishop goes to h8, after which you can play this check, king d7, and continue with knight f8. So, of course, they can win here, but they lose the bishop. If this move, you can even continue with bishop h6, because bishop f6 means g5. So that's the reason why they decided instead to take. Knight h8, they take there, but it's completely losing. After king c3, they just resign. Even if they just took there, knight g6 and we promote. So there is even no chance to stop at king f8, knight g6, we still promote. This is how white realized their main advantage. So you can ask me, well, where white sacrificed the piece, where did he win it back? Well, originally black sacrificed the piece, knight takes, and then white decided to not end with extra material by playing this move and then retreating there, because he didn't want to find the only moves in this position. Instead, he decided to play g4 to sacrifice the knight back, but to keep this knight on e4 untouchable. Nobody can attack it, and this knight limits the activity of the enemy bishop, both bishops. If the e-pawn cannot move, then the bishop on g7 becomes useless, and this bishop is also bad. Okay, so this is how it works. Okay, fine. So we have one more game to analyze. Before that, let me share some other things with you. Like, for example, there was a question regarding courses. Let me show you. So this is my website, and most of courses are published here. So I can share the link here, tricksofchess.com. All courses, you click there, and then you can find them. So hacking tactics, winning strategies, uh, play like mag. Oh, this is a very interesting course where I explain how your plan depends on the pawn structure. Well, this is a Sicilian course. This is an opening course, how to defeat white with Paulson or Taimanov Sicilian. Well, and these are old courses, so I don't want to advertise them. Well, these are the ones that I recommend. As for my opening courses, some of them are on Chessable and some of them are on the TheChessWorld.com. For example, once you go there, click store and then enter my family name. You will see all these courses appeared. So there are some opening courses like Scandinavian for white. No, for black with knight f6 as the second move. So Max Lange attack, Wing Gambit, Catalan courses here are two. So two. Oh, well, Grandmaster Dmitry Bashirov helped me with these courses. So that's why his picture is on the cover too. So I can send you the link. So don't forget to use my coupon code, which is Victor60. I'll show you how it works. So for example, you decide to purchase this course, you click add to cart, then you go to your cart here and have a coupon, click here to enter your code. So you enter Victor60, apply, and it gives you a 60% discount. So the course costs a little more than $51. So this is how it works. I have a lot of courses here. Let's do it once again. So this. And some, well, this is a opening course. There is also how to beat knight f3 course. So, well, beating knight f3, yeah, beating English opening with black. Well, what else? So webinars are free, so you can come, you can join at any moment. You can also share it with your friends, chess players, if you like them. However, if you want to support my work, you can always donate using this link. This is the link to donate through PayPal. How does it work? You just click this button, enter the amount that you want to donate, for example, $10, and click this button PayPal. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You enter and then send this money directly to my PayPal account. Okay, so let's continue with the analysis. The next game that we're going to talk about is the game between Tigran Petrosyan and Samuel Schweber. Well, again, we have the same type of the position. It's King's Indian, but this time these pawns were exchanged. No C pawns, and the knight is already there. What white should do to get a stable advantage that he can later convert? So maybe knight c4. Knight c4 is definitely a helpful move, but well, do you have anything else conceptually? Yeah, so just do you have anything else which can illustrate the plan for white? Because knight c4 is just a move. So knight c4, let's say rook e8. What then? So thanks, Dan, Bishop, and thanks for Square Chess Academy. Yes, Bishop c5 makes a lot of sense. Well, this bishop isn't a super good bishop because most enemy pawns are located on the dark squares, so this bishop is restricted. Um, but by doing this, you can dominate through the light squares. Uh, with this move, you also doesn't you don't allow your opponent to get any dynamic, and it means that for the entire game, your opponent would have to defend his position, which is always hard. If your opponent has a counterplay, it's easier for him to to play, just to find the moves, because he can potentially threaten with anything, and you would have to defend. And he very often feels enthusiastic about it, about the threats that he create, but not in this exact position, because now they just have to stay and wait. We can totally blockade using the light squares. So probably this move here, but well, let's say they protect, or maybe they even move 98 with the idea of 96 and trying to exchange. That's why before doing this, before doing knight c4, it does make sense to play bishop b5. Why? Bishop b5 is a multifunctional move. So bishop b7, 92, 98, and what do you think we should do? Okay. There is no right guess at the moment in the chat. So rook c1, rook c1. Well, rook c1 is not a bad move. Brian, what does it mean f5? Ah, knight g3 f5. Okay, got it. I would maybe play knight rook c1 first, but I think the move that was played in the game originally is very strong from a strategic point of view. No, let me actually check the engine. I did check the engine, but I don't remember what the engine suggests in this position. Okay, the engine agrees with Tigran Petrosyan. White played properly well. They played bishop e8. So rook e8. Please explain the concept. Why this exchange was favorable for white? No, well, knights are better in close positions. True. But it doesn't mean that in every close position we should exchange the bishop for the knight, because the positions tend to get more open once the game comes to the end game. And that's why chess players prefer to keep the bishops alive, to be able to take advantage of having a bishop in the end game. Okay, thanks for your explanation. First of all, the knight was about to blockade on d6. That's right. Well, if we play this move, then after knight d6, we have an unpleasant choice. We actually have to take, because if not, then they take on b5, and then we may lose a pawn. So if they exchange like that, we would take two. So for example, if in this position they would play not bishop b7, but bishop a6, we would probably take. Take, rook takes, and then we would continue with knight e2 and knight e4. So we have the pawn structure where our pawns are located on light squares. So that's why the light squared bishop isn't good there. So we are fine to lose this bishop, but not allow our opponent to initiate the blockade with a piece on d6. Knight c4, bishop a6. Well, queen b3. Well, we cannot stop this, or bishop takes e2 move. That's why let's defend and keep the blockade on c4. Queen f6. So attacking f3, but rook c1. And if they take there, we take with a rook. Bishop f8, activating the bishop. And now we do the main idea which Brian had in mind. Knight goes to g3 to go to f5. But bishop c8. So f5 is a very good spot. That's why they decide to not exchange the bishop here, but to exchange the bishop there. Castle, rook d8, just some prophylaxis, and rook fc2 to add pressure on c5 once it is required. Then in this game, black played a terrible move, and I definitely understand the reason of this move from a psychological point of view. So black is in a very tough situation. So they don't have chances to play for a win at all. What they have, again, just stay and wait and defend against threats. For example, by moving the bishop here to cover important squares and prevent the white's invasion. But they wanted to play for a win, and they played this move to sacrifice the pawn and get this bishop more active through this diagonal or maybe through this diagonal. But let's discuss what happens if, for example, something logical is played like queen e7, right? How would you continue then? 93, well, yes, you can play 93, but okay, so you will invade this. For example, queen f6 back, you invade. I can take once. You bring the other knight. And why is it winning? It's tough, but looks like you didn't progress. So instead, it would be better for us to bring the knight to e3, this one. And at a certain moment of the game, be ready to play d6. So for example, king g7, d6, and after, let's say, bishop e6, then knight e5. Now he is forced to exchange, and then in this position we have a passed pawn. We can use this to attack this, queen 3 also, or maybe we decide to invade with a knight. This is where we definitely have more chances. So just uh, staying and waiting wasn't a good strategy too. That's why they decided to play queen e6 and lost faster. Knight e5. Rook c7, defending this. Knight goes back and bishop is activated. Queen d3. King goes to g8. Rook d2. How would you continue them? So knight f5, but they will take. Yeah, the pawns are already like a wall, but our task is actually to somehow take advantage. So we should play for a win. We shouldn't play for a fortress. So yeah, we can build a fortress with just b3 here, and our opponent would be unable to progress. But this is not the goal. Our task is to find a way of how to invade his camp and take advantage of his weaknesses. So e5, how does it work? Well, if they take, you can take with a knight, and they lose the pawn on c5. So it wasn't a pawn sacrifice, it was a pawn exchange in order to open the position and end with an extra pawn. So knight e5, rook e5, queen a6, bishop a6, rook c5, and another pawn is under attack. So bishop c8, rook a5, f5. So we are already 2 pawns up, but they're going to ruin our pawn structure and maybe take the h5. So what would you play now? Well, king h3 works if they take, but what if they play rook e3 right away, threatening to take there first? Okay, there is another suggestion, rook a8 first. Well, I like rook a8. F takes g4, f takes g4, rook e2, e8. Oh, you can defend with this move. Yeah, that would be a possible strategy. Instead, white decided to simplify and just took on f5. This is a rook and game, but with 2 pawns extra, it's completely winning. Rook df8, attacking this, but d6, and capturing on f3 is a blunder, because after d7 they have to use this rook to stop, but leave the other rook hanging. So rook takes b5, it takes b5. King f7, and after d7 they resign. But let's investigate why did they resign. For example, how to play. d7, king e7. How would you continue here? b6, yeah, you can play b6. But I think the best way is king g3. Why? The goal is to exchange rooks here and invade the enemy camp. So if rook d8, you go there, he takes, and you invade his camp, while he is going to capture your b5 pawn. If he goes to that side, you promote it. But b6 works too. You could even play b6 here, and after rook b8, then d7, king e7. Well, then you can play king g3, king g4, and so on. So for example, this, they cannot take because you promote. They have to block. And now you can defend with rook d6 and take there also. For example, king e7. Well, d8 wins because you can still invade the enemy camp much faster than he can defend his position. But also just rook h6. King d7, b7. You defend this, bring your king, and promote the h. Should be fine. Okay, so let's do a summary. In all these examples, one of the players was able to get a stable advantage. And this kind of advantage gives very good winning chances. It was a positional but stable advantage. The key idea was to keep it during the whole game and increase it by forcing our opponent to defend. Well, yeah, if you obtain such an advantage, it doesn't obligatory mean that you win the game. But by neutralizing the any counterplay that your opponent can initiate, you force your opponent to defend the position, which is always hard. And this is how he he makes mistakes, and you take advantage of them and win the games. So please keep it in mind and try to keep your stable advantage to the very end of the game. And if you have a choice, okay, so if you have an unstable advantage, then remember that in order to convert this unstable advantage, you have to take immediate actions right away. But if your advantage is stable, you may play slowly and strategically improve your pieces. So we are done for today. Do you have any questions? Anything you want to share? The next webinar will be next Sunday. It's the 29th of December. So happy Christmas to all of you who celebrated. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Okay, so that's all for today. I'm going to send you the homework. I'll send it as an email for those of you who are registered. And also here in the chat, it's a PDF file. Let me show you. So I'll already send it. There are two positions, these two, where I ask you to come up with a plan for black. So here in the second one, it's extra pawn. Convert this advantage. Come up with a plan. Okay, fine. So if you have any questions, you can also message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. See you all next Sunday. Bye-bye.